He stood on the cracked sidewalk with one battered suitcase beside him and watched the iron gates of the Vale family estate close in his face. Behind those gates, warm golden lights glowed through tall windows. Laughter drifted from the dining hall. His laughter should have been among them. That house had been bought with his father's money. That land had been expanded with his mother's inheritance. The company, supporting every greedy mouth inside, had survived because Ethan had spent years working himself half to death. Yet tonight, he had been thrown out like a diseased dog. His Aunt Margaret stood beneath the covered entrance in a silk robe, holding a glass of wine as if she were watching an entertaining street performance. "You should be grateful we let you stay this long," she called. Beside her, Ethan's uncle Victor smirked while adjusting the gold watch Ethan had once given him. "You have no job, no shares, and no legal claim to this property. What exactly did you expect? That we would feed you forever?" Ethan said nothing. His younger cousin, Caleb, stepped forward, sheltered from the rain by a servant holding an umbrella. Caleb wore Ethan's tailored coat. He had stolen Ethan's office, Ethan's position, Ethan's fiancée, and now even his clothes. "You always looked down on us," Caleb said. "You thought being the old man's favorite made you untouchable. Look at you now." A beautiful woman appeared beside him. Sophia Lane, Ethan's former fiancée, the woman who had once cried in his arms and promised she would follow him even if he lost everything. She slipped her hand around Caleb's arm without the slightest hesitation. "Do not make this uglier than it already is," she said. "You should leave with some dignity." Dignity. The word almost made Ethan laugh. 3 days earlier, Ethan had still been the acting director of Vale Holdings. He had controlled investment accounts, supplier contracts, real estate developments, and emergency reserves worth more than most people could imagine. Then, Victor had presented forged evidence accusing him of embezzlement. Margaret had invited relatives from every branch of the family to witness his humiliation. Caleb had bribed 2 employees to claim Ethan had transferred company funds into private accounts. Sophia had provided the final betrayal. She had testified that Ethan planned to flee the country. Every signature was false. Every accusation was absurd. But Ethan's grandfather had recently died. The family board was filled with parasites. The people Ethan had supported for years turned against him before the funeral flowers had even wilted. They stripped him of his title. They froze his bank accounts. They seized his apartment and vehicles under the excuse of an internal investigation. Then, after forcing him to sign a temporary surrender of authority, they kicked him out of the family home. Victor raised his glass toward Ethan. "Go sleep under a bridge. Perhaps hunger will teach you humility." The relatives behind him burst into laughter. Ethan slowly looked at every face. His Aunt Margaret, his Uncle Victor, his cousin Caleb, his cousin Beatrice, who had spent years begging Ethan to pay her gambling debts. His second uncle Marcus, whose failing restaurant chain Ethan had rescued twice. His grandmother's younger sister, Eleanor, who had demanded an entire seaside property as a birthday gift, even Sophia. Not one of them looked ashamed. They looked satisfied. They believed they had won. They believed the quiet man standing in the rain had lost everything. Ethan lowered his eyes. A faint smile touched his lips. It was not warm. It was not broken. It was the smile of a man memorizing names for a funeral list. Victor noticed it and frowned. "What are you smiling about?" Ethan lifted his suitcase. "Nothing." His voice was calm. Too calm. Margaret clicked her tongue, still pretending to be proud. "Pathetic." Ethan turned away. The gates locked behind him with a heavy metallic sound. He walked through the rain without looking back. No one inside the estate understood that Ethan had expected this betrayal. Not this soon. Not with such shameless cruelty, but he had expected it. His grandfather had warned him years ago. Blood attracts loyalty when there is nothing to steal. Once wealth appears, blood attracts wolves. Ethan had refused to believe it. He had paid their debts, covered their scandals, protected their children, saved their businesses. He had mistaken dependence for affection. He had mistaken smiling faces for family. That mistake had cost him his name, his home, and nearly his life. But it had not cost him everything. The suitcase beside him contained only 2 shirts, a pair of trousers, and an old leather notebook. The real inheritance was hidden elsewhere. Ethan walked for nearly an hour until the estate disappeared behind hills in darkness. His phone had been disconnected. His cards had been frozen. The few bills in his wallet were soaked through. He stopped beneath an abandoned bus shelter and sat on the cold metal bench. Pain pulsed through his ribs. Earlier that evening, Caleb's bodyguards had beaten him in the underground garage. They had been careful. No broken bones, no wounds visible from a distance. Just enough pain to make the message clear. Leave quietly. Disappear. Die somewhere inconvenient. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. For one moment, exhaustion pulled him into darkness. Then a voice sounded inside his mind. Inheritance authority confirmed. Bloodline identity verified. Final condition fulfilled. Ethan's eyes opened. The rain continued falling. The road remained empty. Yet pale blue light appeared before him, forming lines of words in the air. Hidden estate system awakened. Primary asset unlocked. Blackstone Villa ownership transferred. Emergency capital released. Loyalty assessment complete. Hostile relatives marked. Ethan stared at the glowing words without moving. He had not imagined them. The voice returned. The hidden estate system had been created under the authority of his late grandfather, Arthur Vale. Its purpose was simple. It would activate only after Ethan had been removed from the family, stripped of visible wealth, and betrayed by the people closest to him. A test. A cruel one. But Arthur Vale had never trusted easy gains. He had trusted survivors. More words appeared. Blackstone Villa was not an ordinary residence. It stood beyond the northern lake, hidden inside a private mountain district that had never appeared in public property records. The villa included underground vaults, private farmland, water reserves, medical facilities, security systems, warehouses, and ownership documents connected to a web of secret companies. Companies Victor did not know existed. Companies that quietly owned the debt behind Vale Holdings. Ethan's breathing slowed. A final message appeared. Total accessible capital exceeded the public value of the entire Vale family fortune many times over. The relatives who had thrown him into the rain had stolen a decorated shell. The foundation beneath them belonged to Ethan. He looked down at his hands. They were bruised, steady. His grandfather had known. The old man had known the family would tear itself apart after his death. He had placed the visible inheritance in front of them like meat before starving dogs. Then he had hidden the real empire behind humiliation. Ethan laughed softly. The sound was almost drowned by the rain. A black vehicle appeared at the far end of the road. It moved silently toward the bus shelter and stopped in front of him. The rear door opened. An elderly man in a dark suit stepped out and bowed. "Welcome back, Master Ethan." Ethan recognized him immediately. Silas Reed, his grandfather's former private secretary. The family believed Silas had retired overseas years ago. Yet here he stood untouched by the storm, holding a large black umbrella. Ethan rose. "Did my grandfather arrange all of this?" Silas glanced at the bruises on Ethan's face. For the first time, cold anger entered the old man's eyes. He arranged the opportunity. Your relatives arranged their own destruction. Ethan entered the vehicle. The interior was warm. A clean suit waited beside him. So did a medical kit, a secured phone, and a folder stamped with a Blackstone emblem. As the car moved away, Silas sat across from him. "The villa is prepared. The accounts are active. The staff have waited for your arrival." Ethan opened the folder. Inside were property deeds, corporate records, debt agreements, private trust documents, and confidential reports. He read the first page, then the next. His smile deepened. Vale Holdings was drowning. The family did not know because Ethan had personally covered the losses through emergency loans. Those loans had not come from public banks. They had come from companies secretly controlled by his grandfather. Now those companies belonged to Ethan. Victor had seized the chair. Caleb had seized the director's office. Margaret had seized the estate. But every major company asset was tied to debt Ethan could call in at any time. Factories, hotels, land, even the family mansion. All of it could be taken. Not through revenge, through contract law, through signatures they had ignored because they assumed Ethan would always protect them. Silas placed a tablet on the table. Live security footage from the Vale estate appeared. The relatives were celebrating. Champagne bottles covered the dining table. Caleb stood at the head of the room, bragging about new luxury purchases. Margaret discussed renovating Ethan's former bedroom into a private salon. Victor announced plans to sell several company reserves and divide the profits among family members. Sophia sat beside Caleb wearing the diamond necklace Ethan had given her. Ethan watched in silence. They believe the company has enough cash to support them for years.
Silas said it does not. Ethan replied. No. How long? Without your intervention, the first liquidity crisis will appear within weeks. Ethan closed the tablet. Do not intervene. Silas studied him. Should we call in the debt immediately? No. That would be too merciful. A quick collapse would allow them to blame Ethan.
They would cry to the press, pretend they had been ambushed, beg allies for help.
Ethan wanted something slower.
He wanted every greedy relative to spend freely.
He wanted them to sell stable assets to fund useless luxuries.
He wanted them to sign personal guarantees.
He wanted Victor to believe he was a financial genius.
He wanted Caleb to stand on a mountain of borrowed money and call himself king. Only then would Ethan remove the ground beneath them.
Let them celebrate, he said.
Increase their available credit through our hidden lenders.
Silas's brows lifted slightly. Increase it. Make the terms attractive. Encourage expansion. Encourage spending. Offer them enough rope to decorate the entire estate. A cold smile appeared on Silas's face.
And when they have tied the knot, Ethan looked out at the dark road.
Pull. The vehicle left the city and entered a private mountain route. Steel barriers opened before them. Security lights illuminated dense forests.
Beyond the trees, Blackstone Villa rose above the lake.
It was not a villa.
It was a fortress disguised as paradise. Dark stone walls reflected silver moonlight.
Wide glass windows overlooked the water. Gardens stretched along the hillside.
A private road curved toward an enormous entrance guarded by silent men in black uniforms. Farther below, Ethan saw greenhouses, storage buildings, solar fields, and a landing platform.
The gate opened. Dozens of staff members stood beneath the covered courtyard.
They bowed as the vehicle stopped.
Welcome home, Master Ethan. Home.
The word felt strange. Ethan stepped out of the car. Warm light spilled across the stone path.
No one laughed at him.
No one looked at his wet clothes with disgust.
No one asked what he could give them. Silas led him inside.
The main hall was vast, but quiet. At its center stood a portrait of Arthur Vale. The old man stared down with the same stern expression he had worn throughout Ethan's childhood. Beneath the portrait was a sealed letter.
Ethan opened it. The message was brief. Family is not proven by shared blood. It is proven when you have nothing left to offer. When they throw you away, do not crawl back. Build higher walls. Ethan folded the letter.
For years, he had carried the Vale family on his back.
Now he understood.
They had never been his burden. They had been his chains. He walked toward the tall windows overlooking the lake. The rain had stopped. Clouds parted above the mountains. Far beyond the dark horizon, the Vale family estate remained filled with music and arrogant laughter. They believed Ethan was wandering the streets with nowhere to sleep. They believed he would return within days, kneel at their feet, and beg for scraps.
Ethan placed one hand against the cold glass. His reflection smiled back at him. He would not return. He would wait. He would watch them devour the false fortune they had stolen. He would watch them sell their pride one piece at a time. And when hunger finally drove them through the mountains, when their silk clothes became rags, when their mouths cracked from thirst and their knees bled against the road, they would discover where Ethan lived. They would gather outside the gates of Blackstone Villa. They would scream his name. They would call him family. They would beg for food. They would fight each other for whatever fell from his table. And Ethan would stand above them, warm and untouched, remembering the night they had left him in the rain. He turned toward Silas. Prepare a list of every relative who voted to remove me. It is already prepared. Good. Ethan's eyes became colder than the lake outside. From this moment forward, no one saves them from their own greed. Victor Vale woke to the sound of applause. For several seconds, he did not remember where he was. Then, the silk sheets shifted beneath him. Sunlight poured through the enormous windows of the master bedroom, Arthur Vale's bedroom. The room Ethan had refused to enter after the funeral. Victor had moved in before the old man's body was cold. He stretched beneath the embroidered blanket and smiled. At last, no more waiting, no more pretending to respect that quiet, calculating nephew. No more lowering his voice whenever Ethan entered a room. The estate belonged to Victor now. The company belonged to him. The family belonged to him. He rose, wrapped himself in a velvet robe, and opened the bedroom doors. A servant stood in the hallway holding a silver tray. "Good morning, Chairman Vale." Victor paused. "Chairman." The title flowed through him like expensive liquor. "Say it again." The servant lowered her head. "Good morning, Chairman Vale." Victor laughed. He took the coffee and walked toward the balcony. Below, decorators covered the garden with white flowers and golden banners. Margaret had decided they needed a celebration grand enough to announce the family's new era. She called it a leadership banquet. Victor knew what it really was, a coronation. Guests from investment firms, construction companies, political offices, and private clubs had already begun arriving. Men who had ignored Victor for years now rushed to shake his hand. Women who once looked through him now laughed at every joke. Without Ethan in the way, they finally understood Victor's value. At least that was what he told himself. He did not know that every guest had received a private message from one of Ethan's hidden companies. The message had been simple. Vale Holdings was preparing an aggressive expansion. Generous credit facilities were available. High-interest opportunities could be arranged. The hungry came immediately. By noon, the estate glittered. Margaret wore a crimson gown covered in hand-sewn crystals. She moved through the hall like an empress, correcting servants and insulting florists. "Replace those arrangements," she snapped. "They looked cheap." "They were imported this morning," the head gardener replied carefully. "I do not care. Ethan always chose dull colors." "I want everything changed," she smiled while saying his name. It felt good. For years, Ethan had controlled household spending. He had rejected her demands for weekly redecorations. He had questioned the cost of imported wine. He had even refused to fund her plan for a private theater beneath the eastern wing. He had called it irresponsible. Margaret had never forgiven him. Now there would be no restrictions. She summoned an architect and ordered the destruction of Ethan's former bedroom. The walls would be removed. The adjoining library would become a salon. His private study would become a dressing room. Every trace of him would be erased. Caleb arrived late. He stepped from a white sports car that had been delivered that morning. Sophia sat beside him wearing dark glasses and a pale fur coat. Reporters gathered near the entrance. Caleb slowed his steps so they could photograph him. He placed one hand around Sophia's waist. The other rested casually in his pocket. "Look this way, Mr. Vale. Are you replacing Ethan as executive director? Will you lead the company's expansion? Is the engagement official?" Caleb smiled. "We have many exciting announcements coming." Sophia tilted her face toward him. The cameras flashed. Neither of them noticed the man across the road photographing the vehicle identification number. The sports car had not been purchased. It had been financed through a luxury leasing company. That company belonged to Ethan. Inside the banquet hall, Caleb found Victor surrounded by bankers. One of them was a broad man named Harold Crane. Crane represented Meridian Capital, a private lender known for offering fast money to unstable companies. Victor knew the reputation. He simply did not care. Crane smiled and raised his glass. "Chairman Vale, your family has entered a remarkable period." Victor nodded as if he heard such praise every day. "We intend to move faster than before." "Excellent." Caution is often another word for fear. Caleb laughed loudly. That was Ethan's problem. He was always afraid. The bankers exchanged glances. They had met Ethan. They knew fear had never guided him. But rich fools did not need correction. They needed contracts. Crane opened a leather folder. "Meridian can provide immediate liquidity for expansion, minimal oversight, flexible collateral, funds released as soon as the guarantees are signed." Victor looked at the amount. His heartbeat quickened. It was far more than the company needed, far more than Ethan would ever have approved. "What collateral?" Crane smiled. "Several underused properties, certain subsidiary revenues, personal guarantees from controlling family members." Margaret leaned closer. "Personal guarantees are merely formalities, correct?" Of course, the lie passed smoothly. Crane had been instructed to make the trap feel soft. No pressure, no urgency, just warmth, praise, and enough money to awaken every hidden appetite. Victor picked up the pen. Caleb placed a hand on the table. "Should we review it first?" For one brief moment, instinct tried to save him. Then Victor frowned. "Review it with whom?" Caleb hesitated. Ethan had always reviewed contracts. Ethan had always noticed buried clauses. Ethan had always stayed awake until dawn, calculating risk. But Ethan was gone.
Mentioning him now would make Caleb look weak.
He withdrew his hand. I was only asking. Victor signed. Margaret signed. Caleb signed.
Marcus signed because Victor promised to fund his restaurant chain. Beatrice signed because Margaret promised to clear her gambling debts. Eleanor signed because she had already chosen a seaside mansion she wanted to purchase. One after another, the relatives tied their futures to the contract. Crane closed the folder. His smile never changed.
Congratulations. Far away inside Blackstone Villa, Silas placed the digital copies before Ethan. Every controlling relative has signed. Ethan sat at the end of a long black table.
Morning light reflected from the lake beyond the windows. A fresh suit concealed the bruises on his body.
The swelling around his eye had already begun to fade. He read each signature slowly.
Victor, Margaret, Caleb, Marcus, Beatrice, Eleanor, even Sophia had signed a secondary guarantee through a newly created media subsidiary. She wanted her own luxury brand.
Caleb had promised to build it with company money. Ethan closed the file. They moved faster than expected.
Greed often does.
The first transfer is ready. Shall we release the full amount? Release part of it. Enough to make them comfortable. Enough to make them reckless. Silas nodded.
A financial officer at the other end of the table entered the command.
Within moments, money flowed into Vale Holdings.
At the estate, Victor received the notification. He stared at the balance and shouted with joy.
The banquet erupted.
Champagne was opened.
Musicians played louder. Margaret ordered every servant to receive a small bonus so the family would appear generous. Caleb climbed onto the stage and announced a new era of fearless growth. He promised hotels, shopping centers, entertainment districts, and international partnerships.
He had no plans, no research, no experience, only confidence borrowed from money that did not belong to him.
The crowd applauded anyway. That night, the spending began. Margaret hired foreign designers.
Victor purchased a private aircraft through another shell company.
Caleb ordered a collection of sports cars.
Beatrice cleared part of her gambling debt, then immediately returned to the private tables and borrowed more.
Marcus opened 3 new restaurants in locations Ethan had previously rejected. Eleanor paid a deposit on the seaside mansion. Sophia rented an entire office floor for her luxury brand.
She hired stylists, photographers, consultants, and social media managers.
The products did not exist. The audience did not exist.
But the launch party was magnificent. Every purchase moved through companies Ethan controlled.
Every invoice fed information back to Blackstone Villa. Every luxury became another chain. Ethan watched without excitement.
He did not need to push them. He only needed to stop protecting them. Within days, the first hidden problem appeared. A major construction supplier contacted Vale Holdings.
The supplier demanded payment on overdue accounts.
Ethan had delayed those payments through private agreements.
With Ethan removed, the delay expired.
Victor dismissed the warning. Pay them from the new funds.
The chief accountant swallowed. We also have payroll obligations and several maturing loans. Then refinance. The lenders are asking for updated financial records.
Victor waved one hand.
Send them whatever they want.
The accountant remained still.
What? The records are incomplete.
Victor's expression darkened.
Why?
Director Ethan maintains several private schedules.
We cannot locate them. Caleb leaned back in Ethan's former chair. He probably destroyed them out of spite.
The accountant looked uncomfortable. They may have been connected to emergency reserves, then rebuild them.
That could take months. Caleb stood. Are you saying you cannot do your job? No, sir. Then stop using Ethan as an excuse.
The accountant lowered his head. He left the office and immediately sent his resume to 3 competitors. By the end of the week, 2 senior financial managers resigned.
A legal advisor followed, then a logistics director.
Each had worked closely with Ethan.
Each understood what the family did not. Vale Holdings was not a healthy empire.
It was a wounded animal kept alive through constant intervention. Ethan had negotiated extensions, moved cash between divisions, sold failing assets before losses spread, used his private relationships to prevent panic. Without him, every concealed injury opened at once.
Victor responded by hiring loyal relatives.
Margaret's nephew became finance director despite having no financial training.
Marcus's eldest son became head of logistics. Beatrice's lover became legal advisor.
They praised Victor. They laughed at Caleb's jokes. They approved every reckless decision. That was all the family required. At Blackstone Villa, Ethan received another report.
Silas stood near the fireplace. The senior staff are leaving.
Offer positions to the competent ones at Blackstone companies.
Yes. And the incompetent ones?
Leave them exactly where they are.
Silas almost smiled. A quiet knock sounded.
The doors opened.
A middle-aged woman entered wearing a gray business suit. Her name was Evelyn Hart.
She had served as chief operations officer at Vail Holdings for years. Victor had dismissed her that morning after she refused to approve the sale of a profitable warehouse.
Evelyn stopped before Ethan. For a moment, emotion tightened her face. Your injury healed. I should have done more.
You warned the board.
I failed.
Ethan gestured toward the chair across from him. No, you discovered what the board was worth.
Evelyn sat. Silas placed a contract before her.
She read the company name and froze.
Blackstone Consortium.
It was a silent giant hidden behind dozens of investment firms, property groups, agricultural networks, and technology companies. Rumors claimed it had no single owner.
Rumors claimed governments borrowed from it. Rumors claimed it could destroy corporations without appearing in public. Evelyn looked up. This belongs to you.
It does now.
She turned another page.
The position offered was greater than the one she had lost. The authority was broader. The compensation was enormous. Yet she did not reach for the pen.
What do you want me to do? Build everything they were too blind to imagine. Evelyn understood. In Vail Holdings, let it reveal its true strength. Without Ethan, there was very little strength to reveal. She signed.
Over the following weeks, Ethan gathered the people his relatives discarded. Accountants who refused to falsify records.
Engineers Caleb insulted.
Managers Margaret considered common. Security officers loyal to Arthur Vail. Farm specialists from neglected family land.
Medical staff from clinics Victor planned to close.
Blackstone Villa became the center of a growing machine. Ethan did not simply sit inside his fortress.
He expanded it.
The surrounding farmland was restored. Advanced greenhouses produced vegetables throughout every season. Underground storage facilities filled with grain, medicine, fuel, tools, and clean water.
Private workshops repaired vehicles and machinery.
A secure data center tracked markets, weather, transport routes, and company failures. Every division served a purpose. Nothing existed merely to impress strangers.
While the Vail relatives bought crystal chandeliers, Ethan purchased irrigation systems. While Caleb bought cars, Ethan acquired delivery fleets.
While Sophia paid celebs to attend empty launch parties, Ethan funded laboratories and food processing centers. Their wealth became smoke. His wealth became structure. Then the weather reports changed. A powerful storm system moved across the region.
Experts warned that flooding could damage roads and supply lines.
Victor ignored them.
The family banquet calendar was full.
Margaret had planned another celebration.
Sophia's brand launch would be held at the estate. Caleb wanted fireworks over the lake. Ethan read the forecast and turned to Evelyn. How long could Blackstone operate if the regional supply network stopped?
Comfortably. Yes, 4 years. And the surrounding villages with rationing and expanded production.
We could support them. Prepare quietly. Evelyn nodded.
Silas entered with another report.
The Vail family has requested a second credit increase. Ethan glanced at the documents.
Their first loan was already being consumed. The restaurants were failing. The luxury brand had no sales. The aircraft required constant maintenance.
Construction projects had begun without permits.
Victor wanted more money to hide the losses.
What did Meridian tell them?
That additional funds require more collateral.
What are they offering? Silas placed a photograph on the table. The Vail family estate.
Ethan looked at the gates that had closed in his face, the same gates his relatives believed would protect them forever.
They are willing to mortgage it, Silas said. Ethan remained silent.
Outside, the sky darkened over the mountains.
Distant thunder rolled across the lake. Except, he said.
Silas lowered his head.
That evening, Victor signed away the estate. He celebrated afterward. He believed he had unlocked more capital. He did not realize he had handed Ethan the legal right to take the roof from above his head. The storm arrived the next morning. Rain hammered the city. Roads disappeared beneath rising water. Warehouses closed. Power failed across several districts. Food delivery slowed. Fuel prices rose. Vale Holdings received emergency notices from every direction. Victor called meetings. Caleb shouted at managers. Margaret blamed servants. Sophia complained that the storm had ruined her launch photography. No one had prepared. No one had stored supplies. No one had maintained backup systems. For years, Ethan had handled every emergency before the family noticed it existed. Now the phones rang without answer. At Blackstone Villa, lights remained steady. Water flowed. The greenhouses glowed beneath reinforced glass. Security teams escorted supply vehicles through private mountain routes. In the main kitchen, workers prepared hot meals for nearby families stranded by the flood. Ethan stood above the courtyard as the gates opened to receive them. Children entered wrapped in blankets. Elderly villagers were carried inside. No one begged. No one was humiliated. Food was given because they needed it. Silas approached quietly. The Vale estate has lost power. Ethan watched the rain. Their generators never serviced. Their food stores. Margaret replaced the storage rooms with a wine lounge. Ethan said nothing. Silas continued. They have begun calling former employees. No one is answering. They will find someone. They are calling you. Ethan's hidden phone displayed dozens of missed calls. Victor, Margaret, Caleb, Sophia. The messages shifted from commands to insults, then from insults to concern, then from concern to fear. Where are you? Call us immediately. The company needs access to your files. This is still your family. Stop acting childish. We are willing to discuss your return. Ethan deleted them without listening to the end. Silas looked toward the villa gates. How long before they learn where you are? Soon, and when they come. Ethan remembered the rain, the suitcase, the laughter behind the iron gates. His expression remained calm. Keep the gates closed. Far below the mountain, the Vale family sat in darkness. Their imported food spoiled inside silent refrigerators. Their phones lost power. Their expensive cars could not cross the flooded roads. The servants began leaving. The wine remained plentiful. The bread did not. Victor stood beside a cold fireplace and stared at the rain. For the first time, he whispered Ethan's name without contempt. For the first time, no one answered. The third morning after the storm began, Ethan stood in the command room beneath Blackstone Villa and watched the region collapse. A wall of screens displayed flooded streets, damaged bridges, dark neighborhoods, and empty supermarket shelves. Red markers spread across the map. Every marker represented a failure. A blocked road, a broken substation, a hospital running low on medicine, a village cut off by rising water, a warehouse surrounded by desperate crowds. Ethan studied them without panic. Around him, engineers, logistics officers, medical coordinators, and security commanders waited for orders. They did not shout. They did not blame one another. They worked because Ethan had prepared. Open the western mountain route, he said. The logistics chief answered immediately. The lower section is unstable. Send the reinforced vehicles. Use the quarry road as a secondary exit. What about the flooded villages? Food first, medicine second. Fuel only for emergency services. A medical coordinator stepped forward. The local clinic has lost refrigeration. Move their patients here. We may receive more than 200 people. Then prepare for twice that. No one questioned him. Orders moved through the room. Vehicles left hidden garages beneath the villa. Drones rose through the rain. Portable generators, water filters, medical supplies, blankets, and preserved food were loaded into armored trucks. Blackstone was no longer a private estate. It was becoming the only functioning center of order in the region. Evelyn stood beside Ethan, reviewing reports. The northern greenhouse complex exceeded projected output. Expand the night shift. The underground farms can support it, but we need more workers. Offer shelter and wages to anyone displaced by the flooding. And security screening strict. Ethan had no intention of turning Blackstone into chaos. Compassion without structure created another disaster. Every person entering the estate was registered. Every worker received food, shelter, medical care, and clear responsibilities. Those who contributed were protected. Those who stole were removed. Those who threatened others were restrained. No speeches, no empty promises, only rules. Within days, the outer grounds of Blackstone Villa transformed. Temporary housing rose along the eastern fields. A medical center operated inside a converted guest wing. The old stables became supply depot. The underground kitchens worked without pause. Children ate hot meals beneath warm lights while rain hammered the reinforced glass above them. Families who had lost everything received dry clothes and private sleeping areas. Farmers offered their knowledge. Mechanics repaired vehicles. Nurses joined the medical teams. Engineers restored damaged systems. Ethan did not gather followers by promising glory. He gave them order when the world offered none. That was enough. News of Blackstone spread quietly. At first, people called it a private shelter. Then they called it a supply center. Then they began calling it the Mountain City. No one knew how vast its resources were. No one knew how many companies Ethan controlled. No one knew that every truck moving through the storm belonged to a network built by his grandfather. They only knew that when government convoys failed to arrive, Blackstone vehicles did. When stores ran empty, Blackstone distributed food. When clinics lost power, Blackstone accepted patients. Ethan's name began appearing in grateful messages across the region. The man the Vale family had called useless had become the name frightened people whispered with hope. Inside the Vale estate, hope had already died. The first day without power had felt inconvenient. The second had felt humiliating. By the third, the family understood hunger. The estate's enormous refrigerators had stopped working. Imported meat spoiled. Cream soured. Frozen seafood became useless. Margaret ordered servants to cook everything immediately. But most of the kitchen staff had already left. Those who remained demanded payment. Victor promised them bonuses. They demanded cash. He had none. The company accounts were locked behind emergency reviews. Banks had suspended transfers. The new lenders required documentation before releasing more funds. Every document was buried in offices the family could no longer reach. Caleb tried to drive into the city. His sports car stalled in deep water before reaching the main road. He returned soaked, furious, and covered in mud. Margaret screamed when he entered the marble hall. "Do not ruin the carpets." Caleb stared at her. "We have no food." "There is food in the cellar." "There is wine." "Then drink it." "I need something to eat." "So does everyone." The words silenced the room. For the first time, the family looked at one another without masks. Victor's face was gray. Beatrice's hands trembled. Marcus paced near the windows. Eleanor sat beneath 3 blankets and complained that the cold would kill her. Sophia clutched her dead phone like a sacred object. 2 days earlier, she had still posted photographs from the estate. Now she could not contact her assistants, could not contact photographers, could not contact the celebrities she had paid, could not confirm whether her rented office had flooded. She turned to Caleb. "You said the emergency systems were maintained." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Ethan handled them." The room became still. His name had returned. At first, they spoke it with anger, then discomfort, then fear. Victor poured himself another glass of wine. "He planned this." Marcus stopped pacing. "What?" He knew the storm was coming. Everyone knew. "No, he did something. He sabotaged the generators." Margaret seized the accusation immediately. "Of course, that hateful little snake." Sophia looked toward the dark windows. "Why would he sabotage the estate after being thrown out?" Margaret glared at her to punish us. "But he had no access." "Then he paid someone." Caleb slammed his fist against the table. "Enough. We do not need him." A loud crack echoed from the eastern wing. Everyone froze. Part of the roof had begun leaking. Rainwater ran down the wall. The estate had not been properly maintained in years. Ethan had repeatedly requested structural repairs. Margaret had redirected the budget toward decoration. Now gold wallpaper peeled away in wet strips. A chandelier flickered once. Then darkness swallowed the hall again. Beatrice began crying. "We should call him." Victor looked at her with disgust. "With what?" She held up her powerless phone, then lowered it. Marcus rubbed both hands over his face.
I heard there is a shelter in the mountains. Caleb looked toward him. What shelter?
Blackstone.
Sophia lifted her head. She had heard the name before, not recently. Years earlier, at private dinners, old investors had spoken of Blackstone in cautious voices.
A hidden consortium, a network that acquired failing companies and rebuilt them into giants.
No headquarters, no public owner, no visible weakness.
She remembered Ethan receiving a black envelope after Arthur Vale's funeral. She had asked him what it was.
He had said it was nothing. Where is Ethan? She asked.
No one answered. At Blackstone Villa, Ethan entered a private chamber beneath the main library.
The room had no windows. Its walls were lined with steel cabinets and sealed displays. Silas waited beside a central table. Evelyn stood near him. On the table lay maps, ownership records, and corporate seals.
Silas unlocked the first cabinet.
Inside were original deeds to mineral land, agricultural estates, commercial districts, and transport routes. The second held patents and controlling shares. The third held confidential agreements tied to energy, medicine, security, and communications. Arthur Vale had not merely built a hidden fortune.
He had built an independent ecosystem. Ethan walked slowly between the cabinets. How many active companies?
Silas gave the total in words.
It was larger than Ethan expected. And how many know who owns them? Fewer than a dozen executives keep it that way.
Evelyn pointed toward the regional map. Our transport companies control several routes still above water.
Our energy division can restore limited power to the surrounding districts.
Our agricultural network can stabilize food supplies. But if we reveal too much too quickly, everyone will understand Blackstone is not merely a shelter.
Ethan looked at the glowing map, then reveal only what is necessary to help the region to control the recovery.
Evelyn studied him. There was no cruelty in the decision, only calculation.
Governments would eventually restore the roads. Banks would reopen. Supplies would return, but the people who survived because of Blackstone would remember.
The businesses rebuilt with Blackstone loans would remain connected to Ethan.
The farms saved by Blackstone equipment would sign long-term contracts. The clinics supported by Blackstone medicine would join his medical network. Disaster destroyed weak structures. Ethan intended to replace them with stronger ones under his control.
Begin purchasing damaged assets, he said. Evelyn understood immediately, quietly, through separate companies, offer fair prices, preserve jobs, and the businesses that refuse, let them refuse.
He did not need to force anyone. The storm would make persuasion unnecessary.
Within the week, Blackstone companies began expanding. A damaged food processing plant received emergency repairs in exchange for partial ownership. A transport firm on the edge of bankruptcy accepted fuel and new vehicles.
3 farms joined Ethan's agricultural network. A private clinic became a Blackstone medical branch. An abandoned hotel was converted into housing for displaced families. Ethan turned every failure into another foundation stone.
His empire grew without banners, without celebrations, without reporters. While the Vale family drank their remaining wine in a dark mansion, Ethan acquired the systems that would feed, move, and heal an entire region.
The hidden estate system responded. Agricultural network strengthened. Regional loyalty increased. Emergency authority expanded. New underground facility unlocked. Ethan stood alone in his study when the message appeared. A section of the villa blueprint glowed before him. Deep beneath the mountain lay another sealed level.
He descended with Silas.
Heavy doors opened after recognizing his identity. White lights awakened in sequence. The chamber beyond stretched farther than Ethan could see.
Rows of advanced machines lined the floor.
Automated production units, water purification systems, medical manufacturing equipment, seed archives, robotic tools, secure communication servers.
Arthur Vale had prepared for war, famine, economic collapse, and civil disorder.
Silas watched Ethan's expression. Your grandfather believed comfort made families weak. He was right.
He also believed crisis revealed the difference between an owner and a ruler.
Ethan walked past the silent machines. An owner possesses wealth and a ruler possesses the system that creates it. The new facility came alive.
Production lines began manufacturing filters, medical supplies, batteries, tools, and preserved meals.
Blackstone no longer depended on external markets. Every hour strengthened it.
Every failure outside made it more valuable. At the Vale estate, the opposite happened. By the 5th day, they had eaten the last bread. Marcus killed several ornamental fish from the garden pond and tried to cook them over a fire in the courtyard.
Margaret called it disgusting. Then she ate more than anyone. Eleanor demanded her share first because of her age.
Beatrice hid food beneath her coat.
Caleb caught her. They fought. The struggle ended with a broken plate and blood on Beatrice's lip. Sophia watched from the doorway.
The elegant family she had chosen over Ethan had become a pack of animals in less than a week. She remembered every quiet dinner Ethan had arranged, every bill he had paid, every emergency he had solved before she knew it existed. She had mistaken effortlessness for weakness. Everything had seemed easy because Ethan had carried the weight where no one could see it. Now the weight had fallen and none of them could stand.
A servant entered the hall. He was one of the last remaining workers. "There are vehicles on the northern road." Everyone turned.
"What vehicles?"
Victor demanded.
"Black trucks."
Marcus rushed to the window.
Through the rain, a convoy moved along the distant ridge. The trucks carried a black stone emblem. Villagers stood beside the road receiving crates, food, water, medicine.
Caleb grabbed his coat. "Stop them."
The servants stared at him.
"How?"
"Go to the gate. Tell them this estate requires emergency supplies."
The servant did not move.
Victor stepped forward. "You heard him." The man slowly removed his servant's jacket. He placed it over a chair.
"My family is at the village shelter." Margaret's face twisted. "You cannot leave."
"I already have.
We paid you."
"You have not paid anyone in months. Mr. Ethan covered our wages himself."
The family stared.
The servant walked toward the door.
Caleb blocked him.
"Where is this shelter?"
The man looked directly at him. "Blackstone Villa." Sophia's fingers tightened. "Who owns it?"
The servant smiled for the first time.
"Mr. Ethan." Silence crushed the hall. Margaret shook her head. "No."
Victor's wineglass slipped from his hand. It shattered across the floor. Caleb grabbed the servant's collar.
"You were lying. I saw him." The man pulled free.
He stood at the gates while families entered.
He gave orders. Everyone called him Master Ethan. Sophia stepped backward.
The hidden consortium, the mountain fortress, the endless supply convoys. All of it belonged to the man she had abandoned. All of it had been waiting while she laughed at him in the rain.
The servant opened the door. Cold wind entered the estate.
Before leaving, he looked at the starving family.
"Mr. Ethan is feeding everyone."
His eyes hardened.
"Everyone except you."
The door closed behind him. No one spoke for a long time. Then Eleanor whispered the question all of them feared.
"Will he let us in?" Victor looked toward the empty dining table. Margaret looked at the leaking walls.
Caleb looked at Sophia.
Sophia looked away.
They already knew the answer, but hunger had begun stripping pride from their bones. Soon pride would mean nothing. Soon they would walk through the mud. Soon they would climb the mountain and far above them, beyond walls stronger than the Vale estate had ever possessed.
Ethan's empire continued to grow. He stood on the balcony of Blackstone Villa. As another convoy returned, lights burned across the fields. Greenhouses stretched into the rain.
Workers moved with purpose.
Children laughed in the warm halls below.
Evelyn approached with a tablet.
The Vale estate sent an emergency request. Ethan did not turn.
They request food, fuel, medical supplies, and immediate evacuation.
On what grounds? They claimed family priority. A faint smile touched Ethan's lips. Reject it. They may come here personally.
They will. And when they reached the gate, Ethan watched lightning split the distant sky.
Give them exactly what they gave me. Evelyn waited. Ethan's voice remained calm. Nothing. The Vale family began climbing the mountain before dawn. They did not leave the estate together out of loyalty. They left because there was nothing left to steal from one another.
Victor walked first, wrapped in a ruined wool coat that had once belonged to Arthur Vale. Margaret followed in shoes designed for marble floors, not flooded roads. Caleb carried a leather bag filled with jewelry, contracts, and useless luxury watches.
Sophia wore no makeup.
Her fur coat was soaked through.
Beatrice dragged a suitcase until one wheel broke, then abandoned it in the mud.
Marcus carried Eleanor on his back for less than half a mile before dropping her beside the road and claiming his spine had failed. Eleanor screamed until two former servants passing in a Blackstone transport truck recognized her. She demanded a ride.
They gave her water. Then they drove away. No one in the family spoke after that. The road narrowed as it entered the mountains. Floodwater covered the lower path. Trees had fallen across the old route. Every obstacle forced them deeper into the cold. They had expected the journey to be difficult. They had not expected the villages to be alive. Warm lights glowed from temporary shelters. Blackstone generators powered clinics and food stations. Children wore dry clothes. Workers unloaded crates of vegetables, bread, medicine, and clean water. At every stop, the Vale family saw the same Blackstone emblem. It appeared on trucks, blankets, medical tanks, portable power units. It was everywhere. Sophia watched a young mother receive a hot meal without being asked for payment. The woman began crying. A Blackstone volunteer placed another meal in her hands for her child. No cameras, no speeches, no humiliation. Sophia lowered her eyes. Ethan had once treated her the same way. Quietly, completely, without demanding applause. She had called him boring. She had called Caleb ambitious. Now Caleb was trying to trade a gold watch for half a loaf of bread. The volunteer refused to take the watch. Food is distributed according to registration. Caleb's face darkened. Do you know who I am? The volunteer looked at his mud-covered clothes. No. I am Caleb Vale. Caleb raised his voice. My family owns Vale Holdings. A man in line behind him laughed. Another joined him. Soon several villagers were smiling. Caleb turned red. What is so funny? An old farmer stepped forward. Vale Holdings stopped paying our transport contracts. A mechanic spoke next. Vale Holdings closed our repair center. A nurse tightened her grip around a supply box. Vale Holdings tried to seize our clinic. The laughter disappeared. The villagers stared at Caleb with open hatred. He stepped backward. Sophia pulled his sleeve. Leave. The family continued upward. Behind them, food was distributed. Not one portion followed. By midday, Margaret's shoes had split. Her feet bled. She tore fabric from Beatrice's coat to wrap them. Beatrice tried to stop her. Margaret slapped her. Beatrice lunged. They fell into the mud, clawing at each other. Victor did not intervene. Caleb watched for several seconds, then took Margaret's jewelry pouch while she was distracted. Sophia saw him. She said nothing. Hunger had changed all of them. Or perhaps it had merely removed the disguise. Far above, Blackstone Villa prepared for the worst storm of the season. The command room pulsed with quiet activity. Engineers reinforced the southern wall. Medical teams moved vulnerable patients underground. Food production continued without interruption. The hidden manufacturing level produced emergency batteries and water filters through the night. Ethan stood before the regional map. A massive red formation covered the coast and moved inland. The first storm had damaged the region. The second would tear it open. Evelyn approached. The river barriers will fail if the rainfall continues. Which districts are most exposed? She marked them. The industrial basin, the eastern residential zone, the old hospital quarter. Evacuate them. Local authorities say there is not enough transport. Use ours. They may resist private control, then give them the choice between wounded pride and drowning. Silas entered with a secure message. Vale Holdings has collapsed. Ethan turned. The lenders called their emergency review this morning. Payroll failed. Suppliers seized inventory. 3 major subsidiaries entered default and the board began fighting. Silas placed a live audio feed on the table. Victor's appointed directors screamed over one another from separate emergency locations. Some accused Caleb, others accused Victor. Margaret's nephew had transferred company cash into a private account before disappearing. Beatrice's lover had destroyed legal records. Marcus' sons had abandoned the logistics division. Every loyal relative had taken what remained and fled. Ethan listened without expression. They lasted longer than I expected, he said. Silas opened another file. Meridian has activated the collateral provisions. Evelyn looked toward Ethan. The estate is now legally controlled by Blackstone. The gates that had closed on Ethan no longer belong to the family inside them. Neither did the land. Neither did the furniture. Neither did the wine cellar Margaret had protected more carefully than emergency food. The visible Vale fortune was gone. The relatives simply had not reached the mountain gate yet to learn it. A security officer entered. The southern watchtower has identified a group approaching on foot. Silas glanced at the surveillance screen.
Victor, Margaret, Caleb, Sophia, Beatrice, Marcus, Eleanor.
They looked smaller from above. Mud-covered shapes crawling toward a wall. Ethan watched them in silence. Should we send guards? The officer asked.
No, they may collapse before reaching the gate. Then they will discover how long the road felt when I walked away from them. The second storm struck that afternoon. Wind slammed against the mountains. Rain turned the road into a river of mud. The Vale family finally saw Blackstone Villa through the trees. They stopped.
No one breathed.
The fortress rose above the valley like another world. Its lights burned against the storm. Reinforced walls surrounded green fields and glass structures glowing with life.
Trucks moved through security lanes.
Medical helicopters rested beneath covered platforms. Rows of homes stretched beyond the main villa. The air carried the smell of baked bread.
Real bread. Warm bread. Margaret began crying. Not from regret, from hunger.
That belongs to us, she whispered. Sophia looked at her.
What?
Arthur built it. Arthur was Victor's father.
It belongs to the family.
Victor straightened. The words restored something in him.
Not dignity. Delusion.
Yes. He wiped rain from his face.
Ethan is holding family property illegally.
Caleb tightened his grip on the leather bag.
We walk in.
We demand our rights. Beatrice stared at the guards above the wall. And if they refuse, Victor's face twisted. They will not refuse me. They reached the outer gate before sunset. The steel barrier remained closed.
A black camera moved toward them.
Victor stepped forward. This is Victor Vale.
Open the gate. Margaret pushed beside him. We are Ethan's family. Still nothing.
Caleb struck the steel with both fists. Ethan, his voice echoed across the wall.
We know you are here.
Silas's voice emerged. State your purpose.
Victor lifted his chin. We require entry. Entry is restricted. This property belongs to the Vale family. It belongs to Blackstone. I am the chairman of Vale Holdings. Vale Holdings no longer controls any relevant asset.
Victor's face lost color. Caleb shouted upward.
That is a lie. Silas continued. The estate you occupied this morning has entered foreclosure. The controlling creditor is Blackstone.
Your corporate positions were terminated after insolvency proceedings began.
Margaret gripped the bars. You cannot do this. The contracts carry your signatures.
Caleb pulled papers from his leather bag. These agreements were misleading.
They were read and signed voluntarily. We were deceived.
You were praised. You mistook praise for intelligence. Caleb threw the papers into the mud.
Bring Ethan out.
The speaker became silent.
Minutes passed.
Rain poured down their faces. Then the inner courtyard lights brightened. A figure appeared on the balcony above the gate.
Ethan. He wore a black coat.
No bruises remained visible.
No exhaustion bent his shoulders.
He stood beneath the covered balcony with one hand resting behind his back. Warm light surrounded him.
The family stared upward. Margaret was the first to speak.
Her voice changed instantly.
Ethan, almost loving. We have been so worried. Ethan looked at her.
She smiled through trembling lips.
The storm trapped us. The estate became unsafe. We knew you would want us here. He said nothing.
Victor stepped forward.
There have been misunderstandings. Ethan's eyes shifted toward him. Victor swallowed. The board acted too quickly. Emotions were high after your grandfather's death. We can restore your position. A faint smile appeared on Ethan's face. Restore it?
Yes. Victor rushed onward.
You can return as director.
I will remain chairman for stability, but you may manage operations. Caleb stared at his father. Victor ignored him.
We can rebuild together. Ethan looked across their faces.
You walked here to offer me a job in a company I own through its debt.
Silence. Sophia's eyes widened.
Victor opened his mouth.
No words came.
Ethan continued, the mansion belongs to me.
The land belongs to me.
The aircraft, vehicles, restaurants, offices, and accounts are either seized or frozen.
He looked at Caleb. The sports car stalled because the leasing company disabled it. Caleb's lips parted. Ethan looked at Sophia. The office you rented was never yours. The contract defaulted this morning. Her face collapsed. Then he looked at Margaret. The jewelry around your neck was purchased with borrowed funds secured against property now under my control. Margaret covered the necklace with one hand. Ethan's smile remained cold. You threw me out wearing borrowed silk. Thunder shook the wall. Beatrice dropped to her knees. Please. Margaret turned toward her. Get up. Beatrice ignored her. We have not eaten.
Eleanor lowered herself beside her.
My medicine is gone. Marcus stepped forward. I have children.
Your children abandoned the logistics division after stealing emergency funds, Ethan said.
Marcus froze. Ethan knew everything.
Every theft, every lie, every hidden transfer.
There was nowhere left to hide.
Sophia moved closer to the gate.
Ethan.
His gaze reached her. She flinched.
I made a mistake. No.
Her voice broke.
I was frightened. Victor said you were going to prison. Caleb said the evidence was real. I thought I had no choice. You had one.
Rain ran down her cheeks.
She could no longer tell whether she was crying. I still love you.
Caleb turned sharply.
What did you say? Sophia did not look at him. I never stopped. Ethan laughed. It was quiet. That made it worse.
You wore my necklace while holding his arm.
I was confused.
You helped them empty my apartment.
I was trying to survive. So was I.
Sophia pressed both hands against the gate.
Let me in. Just me. We can talk.
Caleb seized her shoulder.
You shameless traitor.
She turned and struck him.
The sound cracked through the rain.
Caleb stared at her. Then he slapped her back.
Sophia fell into the mud. Victor shouted. Margaret screamed.
Beatrice grabbed Caleb's coat.
Marcus tried to pull them apart. Within seconds, the family began fighting at Ethan's gate.
They cursed one another, accused one another. Victor blamed Caleb for the contracts. Caleb blamed Margaret for the spending. Margaret blamed Sophia for distracting Caleb. Beatrice screamed that Victor had promised to protect them. Eleanor struck Marcus with her cane for dropping her on the road. They tore at each other with wet clothes and bleeding faces.
Ethan watched from above.
The storm had not destroyed them. It had only removed the walls between their greed. A security alarm sounded inside the villa.
Evelyn appeared behind Ethan.
The river barriers failed. The regional map on our tablet flashed red.
Floodwater is moving toward the eastern districts. Ethan turned away from the gate. Deploy every available convoy. The main bridge is blocked. Use the Blackstone Causeway. It has never been opened publicly. Open it. Evelyn nodded and ran. Silas stepped closer. What about them down below? The family stopped fighting when they realized Ethan was leaving. Victor screamed. You cannot abandon us. Ethan looked back over his shoulder.
Victor gripped the gate with both hands.
We are your blood. Ethan's eyes became empty. You remembered that too late. He entered the villa.
The balcony doors closed. At once the fortress moved.
Massive gates opened on the eastern side. Convoys poured into the storm. Armored rescue vehicles descended the mountain. Helicopters rose into black clouds.
Floodlights illuminated the hidden causeway spanning the valley. For years, no one had known it existed.
Now it became the only safe route into the eastern districts. Blackstone teams entered neighborhoods already swallowed by water.
They broke through roofs, pulled children from upper windows, carried patients from the failing hospital, delivered generators to emergency centers.
Ethan stood in the command room and directed everything.
The regional governor appeared through a secure video call. His voice shook. Our rescue headquarters has lost contact with the eastern teams.
Blackstone has them. We need access to your transport network. You have it. Our people will cooperate fully. Then keep them out of the way. The governor hesitated. No one spoke to him like that. Then another emergency alert appeared. He lowered his head. Understood.
Ethan's authority spread across the region.
Police units followed Blackstone routes. Hospitals relied on Blackstone power. Government shelters received Blackstone food. Military engineers used Blackstone maps.
Every system that had failed now moved through Ethan's hands.
Near midnight, the worst surge reached the industrial basin.
A chemical storage facility began breaking apart. If the tanks ruptured, poison water would flood several residential zones.
The authorities ordered evacuation. There was not enough time. Ethan studied the facility layout. Who owns the retaining wall beside the basin? Evelyn searched. One of our construction subsidiaries.
Explosive charges stored for controlled demolition.
Collapsed the western quarry face. Silas understood the rockfall would redirect the surge.
It could also bury the southern access route.
There are rescue teams on that route. Ethan looked at the live tracker. Recall them now. The order moved instantly. Teams withdrew.
Charges were placed.
The mountain shook.
Thousands of tons of stone crashed into the basin, forming a brutal barrier between the flood and the chemical facility.
Water struck the rock wall.
The surge divided. One branch tore through empty warehouses. The other returned toward the river. The storage tanks remained standing. Across the command room, every screen stabilized.
A technician whispered. He stopped it. No one corrected him. Ethan had seen the danger. Ethan had given the order. Ethan had saved entire districts with one decision. By sunrise, the second storm weakened.
The region remained wounded, but it remained alive. Blackstone convoys returned covered in mud.
Rescued families filled shelters across the mountain. Doctors worked beneath steady lights.
Food production continued. Water remained clean.
The people saw Ethan walking through the medical hall.
They stepped aside.
Not because guards forced them. Because gratitude had become awe. An old farmer bowed. Then a nurse. Then a mechanic.
Soon the entire corridor lowered its head.
Ethan stopped. He had never asked for worship. But power did not always require asking.
Outside the outer gate, the Vale family had survived the night beneath a drainage shelter. They watched rescue vehicles pass through side entrances. They watched injured strangers receive warmth. They watched food crates move within sight.
No one came to them. At last, a small service panel opened in the gate. A guard placed a bucket outside. The family rushed toward it.
Inside were vegetable peels, broken bread crusts, and kitchen scraps meant for livestock compost. Margaret stared down, her face twisted with horror.
Caleb grabbed a crust.
Beatrice attacked him. Marcus plunged both hands into the bucket. Eleanor screamed for her share. Victor stood frozen while his family fought over scraps in the mud.
Above them, the Blackstone emblem gleamed on the gate. The same gate Ethan had ordered kept closed.
The same gate before which they now crawled.
A camera watched everything. Inside the villa, Ethan viewed the scene once.
Then he turned off the screen.
Their true humiliation had only begun. Morning came cold and clear.
The storm had passed. Sunlight spread across the mountain, touched the glass roofs of Blackstone's greenhouses, and turned the wet stone walls silver.
Below the outer gate, the Vale family woke in the mud. No one looked human anymore.
Victor's coat was torn. Margaret's hair hung in dirty ropes around her face.
Caleb had a swollen eye from fighting Marcus over a crust of bread. Beatrice clutched the empty scrap bucket against her chest as if it were treasure.
Eleanor coughed beneath a soaked blanket.
Sophia sat apart from them.
She stared at the villa above. All night, warm lights had glowed behind its windows. She had watched silhouettes moving through wide halls.
Doctors and workers rescued families. Children carrying bowls of hot food. Ethan had given shelter to strangers. He had refused it to them. The difference was unbearable. Margaret woke first.
She saw Beatrice holding the bucket and lunged toward her.
Give me what is left. There is nothing left. You hid something. I did not. You always steal. Margaret tore the bucket away and turned it upside down. A single wet vegetable peel fell into the mud. Eleanor crawled toward it.
Caleb stepped on her hand. The old woman screamed. He snatched the peel first.
Victor watched his son chew it. Something inside him cracked. Not guilt, not shame, only terror.
This was what remained of the Vale family.
A name without property.
A bloodline without power. A pack of starving thieves outside another man's gate.
He rose unsteadily and approached the camera. Ethan. No answer.
Victor struck the steel gate.
Ethan, listen to me. The camera turned slightly.
Victor straightened. He wiped mud from his mouth. His voice softened.
We were wrong.
Behind him, Margaret looked up sharply. Victor continued before she could stop him.
We made mistakes after father died. We were frightened. Everyone was under pressure.
Caleb laughed bitterly.
You threw him out.
Victor turned.
You were chairman. You signed the accusations. You wrote them.
Margaret shouted over both of them.
Stop fighting. He is listening.
They looked toward the camera.
At once, every face changed. Anger disappeared. False sorrow replaced it.
Margaret pressed both palms against the gate.
Ethan, my sweet boy.
Sophia closed her eyes. Even now, Margaret could lie without hesitation.
I raised you, she continued. I held you when your mother died. I protected you when you were young.
Inside the security room, Silas watched the live feed with a face carved from stone.
Ethan stood beside him. He remembered the truth.
Margaret had never held him after his mother died. She had complained that his grief disturbed family dinners. She had removed his mother's photographs from the main hall because they made the house gloomy. She had called him ungrateful when he refused to smile at the funeral.
Now she wiped fake tears across a dirty face.
You are angry, she said. You have every right, but family must forgive family.
Ethan activated the speaker.
His voice reached the gate.
Repeat what you told me in the rain.
Margaret froze. Victor lowered his eyes.
Ethan's voice remained calm. You said I should be grateful you let me stay so long.
Margaret opened her mouth.
No sound came. He continued.
Victor said I had no job, no shares, and no legal claim to the property.
That was anger.
Caleb said I had always looked down on you.
Caleb stared at the ground. Sophia told me to leave with dignity. Sophia began crying again. Ethan looked at every face through the camera. You remember blood now because you need food.
Margaret shook her head desperately.
No, we love you. You loved my accounts. We made one mistake.
You made years of choices. Victor stepped closer.
Punish me then.
The others looked at him. Victor raised his chin as though making a noble sacrifice.
Let the rest inside. I will remain here.
Margaret stared at him in horror.
Caleb sneered.
Victor ignored them. He thought Ethan might admire the gesture. He thought sacrifice sounded convincing when offered after everything had already been lost.
Ethan's reply came immediately. You signed the personal guarantees first.
Victor's face collapsed.
You did not protect them. You led them into debt.
You said the guarantees were formalities.
Victor spun around. The lender told me that. You signed without reading. So did you. You were supposed to know.
Victor struck Caleb. Caleb struck back. They fell against the gate, punching and clawing. Margaret screamed at them to stop.
Beatrice laughed.
The sound was wild.
You deserve this. Margaret turned. Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at her. You promised my debts would disappear. You created those debts. You used me to vote against Ethan. You were happy to do it. You said we would be rich.
We were rich before you gambled. Beatrice threw the bucket at her.
It struck Margaret's shoulder. Margaret seized Beatrice's hair.
Marcus joined the fight when Caleb accused his sons of stealing company funds.
Eleanor swung her cane at anyone who came close.
Sophia remained on the ground watching the family destroy itself.
At last, the speaker sounded again. Enough. Everybody stopped. Ethan's voice carried no anger.
That frightened them more than shouting would have.
The gates will open. Silence fell. Margaret released Beatrice. Victor pushed Caleb away.
Hope entered their faces like madness.
The locks moved. Heavy steel doors separated. Warm air drifted outward.
The smell of bread reached them.
Margaret began sobbing. I knew it.
Caleb wiped blood from his lip. Victor straightened his ruined coat.
Sophia did not move. She looked through the opening.
Blackstone guards stood in two silent lines. Beyond them waited a long stone path leading toward the main courtyard. At its end, Ethan sat beneath a covered terrace. A dark table stood before him.
On it rested a glass of red wine. The family entered.
Each step seemed to remove another layer of pride.
Workers watched from distant walkways. Villagers stood near the medical hall. Former Vale employees lined the courtyard. The accountant Caleb had humiliated, the logistics director Marcus' son had replaced.
The servants Margaret had insulted, the nurses Victor had threatened, the engineers the family had dismissed. All of them were clean, protected.
All of them stood inside Ethan's walls. The Vale family walked between them in rags. No one laughed. No one needed to. Silence became sharper than mockery.
Victor reached the terrace first.
He looked at Ethan.
The bruised man from the rain was gone.
Ethan sat in a black chair overlooking the courtyard. He wore a dark suit.
His posture was relaxed.
His expression was unreadable. Silas stood to one side. Evelyn stood to the other.
Behind them, the Blackstone emblem rose from the stone wall like a seal of judgment.
Margaret stepped forward. A guard blocked her. She lowered herself to her knees. The others stared. Margaret Vale had never knelt for anyone. Now hunger bent her easily.
"Please," she whispered. Victor closed his eyes. Then he knelt beside her.
Beatrice followed. Marcus followed. Eleanor collapsed rather than knelt, but no one helped her.
Caleb remained standing longest. He looked around at the watching faces. Then his knees touched the stone.
Sophia came last. She lowered herself without looking away from Ethan.
The entire family knelt before the man they had thrown out.
Ethan lifted the wineglass.
He took one slow sip.
Margaret began speaking. Ethan placed the glass down.
"For what?"
She hesitated. "For everything."
"That is not an answer."
Her lips trembled.
"For removing you from the company and for forcing you out of the estate and for believing the accusations.
You created the accusations." Margaret's shoulders shook.
"Victor took over."
"I created them."
Caleb looked at him.
Victor continued quickly.
"I forged the financial reports.
I bribed the employees.
I persuaded the board."
Sophia whispered. "You told me Ethan would be arrested."
Victor glanced at her with hatred.
Ethan leaned back.
"Continue."
Victor swallowed. "I wanted the chair. You had no ability to hold it. I know you wanted the company.
Yes, you destroyed it."
Victor's head lowered.
"Yes." The word barely escaped him.
Ethan looked at Caleb.
Caleb breathed through clenched teeth.
"I helped him."
"Why?"
"Because you always had everything.
I worked for it.
You were chosen. I was useful."
Caleb flinched. Ethan's words were simple. They cut through years of excuses.
Caleb had never been denied opportunity. He had rejected effort. He had wanted Ethan's reward without Ethan's labor.
Now he knelt in the mud brought in by his own shoes.
Sophia crawled forward. A guard raised one hand. Ethan allowed her closer.
She stopped beneath the terrace.
"I was wrong. I chose Caleb because I thought he had one."
"Yes, I thought you had nothing."
"Yes."
Her tears fell onto the stone.
"I love the life you gave me."
"You love the life."
Sophia's face twisted. "Not me."
She shook her head.
"I can learn." Ethan's expression did not change.
"You had years."
"I was foolish."
"You were loyal to comfort."
"I will prove myself." "There is nothing left to prove."
Sophia reached toward him. The guard stopped her.
She looked at the table. Beside Ethan's wine sat a small silver box. She recognized it, the necklace she had worn at the banquet. The one Ethan had given her.
It had been recovered when Blackstone seized the rented office.
Ethan opened the box. Sophia stared at the diamonds. For one desperate second, hope rose in her face. Ethan lifted the necklace.
Then he dropped it into the wine glass. Red liquid covered the stones.
"You wore this while telling me to leave with dignity." Sophia began to sob. Ethan pushed the glass aside. "You may keep the memory." Margaret crawled forward. "We will work."
Ethan looked at her soft hands. "You dismissed workers for sitting while ill."
"I will change."
"You ordered servants to throw away food rather than let them take leftovers."
Margaret's mouth opened. Former servants watched from the courtyard. She lowered her face.
Victor raised both hands.
"Give us a small house, a little food, nothing more." Ethan looked toward Silas. Silas opened a folder. "The foreclosure records are complete.
The former Vale estate will become a recovery hospital and training center."
Victor shook his head. "That was my father's home."
"It was collateral," Ethan said.
"You cannot erase our family. You erased it yourselves."
Marcus began crawling toward the steps. "My children need help." Your children stole emergency funds and fled. They are still young. They were old enough to steal from workers during a disaster.
Beatrice pressed both hands together. I am sick.
You were in withdrawal from gambling.
I need treatment. Treatment requires honesty. I will be honest.
You hid food from Eleanor last night.
Eleanor turned sharply. Beatrice stared at Ethan.
He had watched everything. Every act at the gate, every betrayal in the mud. There was no lie he had not seen.
Eleanor lifted her head. I am old. Ethan looked at her.
Years earlier, after his mother's death, Eleanor had demanded that Ethan's inheritance be divided because a grieving child could not manage wealth. She had called him weak. She had called his mother selfish for leaving assets to him. Now age had become her shield. You were old when you voted to remove me.
I did not understand. You understood the property list. Her face tightened.
Even kneeling, she felt entitled to sympathy.
Ethan saw it. There was no remorse in them, only fear. They did not regret the cruelty.
They regretted that cruelty had failed. The courtyard remained silent.
Ethan stood. The family looked up. For the first time since entering, hope vanished completely.
His shadow fell across them.
You asked for scraps? Margaret nodded quickly. Yes, anything?
Ethan gestured toward the open gate. Beyond it, beside the outer wall, workers had placed sacks of grain, preserved food, water, blankets, and basic medicine. Enough to keep several people alive for a short time.
Victor stared. You are giving that to us?
No, Ethan continued.
It belongs to the village's Vale holdings harmed.
A convoy waited outside to collect it. Margaret began shaking.
What will we receive?
Ethan looked at the bucket they had carried inside.
Exactly what remained after your greed consumed everything. Nothing waited behind him. No bread, no room.
Caleb rose suddenly.
You think you are a god?
Guards moved. Ethan raised one hand. They stopped.
Caleb stood alone while the others remained kneeling.
His face burned with rage and humiliation.
You got lucky. Grandfather gave you all of this.
Without his hidden money, you would still be in the street.
Ethan walked down the terrace steps.
He stopped before Caleb. You received money.
Caleb's jaw tightened.
You received the company, the estate, credit, staff, influence, every advantage.
Ethan stepped closer.
You turned them into debt, hunger, and mud.
Caleb swung his fist. Ethan caught his wrist. The movement was effortless. Caleb's eyes widened. Ethan twisted. Caleb fell to his knees with a cry. Ethan leaned close. I was not stronger because I inherited more.
His voice was quiet. I inherited more because the only man who understood you knew I would survive you.
He released Caleb.
Caleb collapsed beside his father.
Ethan returned to the terrace. Remove them. Margaret screamed.
Guards lifted her. She kicked against the stone.
Ethan, I raised you. Victor struggled. We confessed. Beatrice begged for medicine. Marcus shouted about family honor. Eleanor cursed Ethan's mother.
The courtyard changed at once. Ethan's eyes became colder than anything they had seen.
Stop.
The guards froze. Eleanor's mouth remained open.
Say her name again.
Eleanor shrank. For the first time, true terror entered her face.
She looked away. Ethan watched them all. You laughed when I walked into the rain. You drank while I bled.
You stole from the dead, betrayed the living, and called greed your birthright.
No one moved.
There will be no forgiveness.
Margaret's scream became a whimper. No rescue. Victor lowered his head. No place inside these walls.
Sophia collapsed against the guard holding her.
Ethan's final words fell like the closing of a grave. You taught me that blood without loyalty is only a stain. The gates opened. The family was dragged outside. They fought until exhaustion silenced them. The gates closed once more.
This time they closed forever.
In the month that followed, the Vale name disappeared from every company record.
Victor was prosecuted for fraud, bribery, and falsification.
Caleb faced charges for theft, assault, and financial conspiracy. Margaret lost every luxury she had hidden.
Beatrice was arrested after attempting to steal relief supplies. Marcus' children turned against him to reduce their own sentences. Eleanor died alone in a public ward after refusing treatment from nurses she considered beneath her.
Sophia vanished from society. The friends who had attended her launch party did not answer her calls. The celebrity she had paid could not remember her name. The man she had chosen lost everything. The man she had betrayed became untouchable. Blackstone continued to rise. The recovery hospital opened inside the former Vale estate. Its dining hall served free meals to displaced families. Margaret's salon became a rehabilitation ward. Victor's master bedroom became an office for emergency doctors. Caleb's private garage became a repair center for rescue vehicles. Every room once built for greed found a useful purpose. Ethan never returned to live there. He did not need to. Blackstone Villa stood above the lake, stronger with every season. Its farms expanded. Its companies rebuilt the region. Its schools trained children whose families had lost everything. Its medical network reached towns once ignored by the Vale Board. People called Ethan ruthless. They were correct. He was ruthless toward waste, toward corruption, toward betrayal. But those who worked honestly beneath his protection never went hungry. Those who kept their word were rewarded. Those who mistook kindness for weakness learned only once. Years later, Ethan stood on the same balcony overlooking the mountain gate. Silas placed a final report beside him. The last legal case connected to the Vale family had ended. Every debt was settled, every stolen asset recovered, every traitor forgotten. Ethan looked toward the distant road where he had once arrived bruised and soaked. He remembered the suitcase, the laughter, the closing gate. He felt nothing. That was the final victory. Not their hunger, not their prison cells, not their broken pride. They no longer occupied any space inside him. Ethan lifted his glass toward the darkening sky. People speak of karma as though heaven delivers it. His reflection appeared in the window, cold, calm, unbroken. Heaven only opens the door. A faint smile touched his lips. The wise man makes his enemies walk through it themselves. Behind him, Blackstone's lights awakened across the mountain.